Day one of the Hearthstone Grandmaster Playoffs for the inaugural season here of HSGM continues. My name is Frode, and I'm joined by Simon Sotto Welch. I was going to say Wench for a second there by accident.
Wow, jeez. I know we haven't cast together for a while. You don't have to be just throwing shade.
Start
like
at the gate, gun blazing. That's right. NA meets EU, not only for playoffs today, but of course for our caster pairs. It's my first time on the desk. In fact, it's my first time casting with Sotto in quite some time. I don't remember the last time we were coming together to join forces.
Korea would be my guess. The Korea tour stop last year. Yeah, sounds like it.
Good times in the past and good times abound. Coming up next, we have the elimination match between Psycho and Bunny Hopper. It's a rematch from the start of the day, Sotto, where you were casting. Let's go ahead and break things down for people who weren't tuning in for the first time. Last time, what was happening from your perspective, Sotto?
Last time, it was a story of the two decks and the way they were built. Bunny has kind of leaned his primary deck towards Rogue a little bit, but he doesn't have a dedicated secondary or tertiary deck to go towards to be able to counter that strategy. You can see one half-time Scavenger comes into the primary deck, which is an anomaly in terms of primary decks for Mage, and it is that little bit of a nod towards Rogue, but then he's used his entire secondary deck on Warrior and his entire tertiary deck on the Rogue Mirror. Whereas on the other hand, Psycho is packing a little bit of heat dedicated to coming into Mage, and that is really paid out in the opening series for him.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of halftime Scavengers make a one-of appearance on ladder, and it felt like it was a lot more effective there, given that against a wider field where you can expect more aggression, like the Mech Hunter, that's very common, or a Murloc Shaman or Token Druid, halftime Scavenger seems super good to buy you that time for the Cyclone Mage. Is it as important in this matchup where you know that there's only like two players you have to effectively prepare for? Maybe not nearly as effective, and we'll see if Bunny Hopper this time around for the second go could learn any lessons, perhaps even micro decisions that we're not accounting for.
And you can see from Psycho's side, he does have close to what we have been calling the standard anti-mage tech, which is Walk the Plank, Fairy Dragon, and Betrayal. But he's decided to pile an Eviscerate on top of that as well. No copies of Eviscerate in his primary deck. We've often been seeing one or two of them thrown in from players in the Europe region. But he's choosing to bring one in into the anti-mage strategy, which makes sense to me because it's one of the most flexible cards you can put in there. And if you watch Rogue play out against Mage, sometimes you do just get a ton of pressure and you want to be aggressive and back that up with damage. Sometimes you're a little bit slower and you need to play the removal game against some giants. Well, Eviscerate is one of the few cards that's actually able to do both.
It just makes me a little sad whenever I see rogues, take out some other cards like Ziliax and whatnot. It always makes me feel like it gives that deck so much flexibility, both from the hand and also as a recover option. But it does make sense if he's not playing things like Snip Snap, Ziliax drops in utility, and it's not really that kind of matchup. You're not really trying to rebound and stay alive just barely against mages. You're trying to be aggressive and push them out of the game.
Yeah, I think if you look at point for point mana efficiency in terms of what you can do against Mage, Ziliax just doesn't cut it for 5 most of the time. Like if you're responding with a Ziliax, like what they have done with that equivalent 5 on their side of the board is usually just so much more oppressive. Ziliax just doesn't cut the mustard, so I do like dropping it out for the matchup. And I'm honestly a big fan of the way Psycho's put together his decks in general.
Is that a common saying, cut the mustard?
It's very British, but yes, it's quite common.
Is that what you guys do? we spread it. Apparently you guys slice and dice your condiments.
Thinking about it, yeah, it's incredibly nonsensical, but it's one of those phrases.
I like it. I'm going to use it now a lot of times.
It's one of those phrases that you just use that you've never really thought about where it comes from, but yeah, that is actually nonsense, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of mustard in Psycho's hand here, as he basically has 4 pieces of the crazy Mana Cyclone combo, which is cheap spells, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mana Cyclone, just needs to find the mana expenditure. When you're on the play, how bad is it when you look at the hand that Bunny Hopper has versus a deck that likes to be on the coin?
Yeah, it's miserable, number one, because you're on the play. You want to be on the coin. But then when you combine that with, not drawing a backstab, not drawing other cheap activators to make stuff happen, that's when it starts to get really messy. And I think we saw this exact kind of game play out in the first series as well.
Yeah, it's brutal. But he does have a proactive game plan in Blink Fox on 3, so at least he has that instead of having to play SI7 Agent for tempo. I found that SI7 is fairly crucial sometimes against Mage.
I've also just noticed Psycho is the rogue player in this matchup, and Bunny Hopper is the Mage player. We have this
apologies. Yes, we were reading the names according to it. We'll flip that in just a second.
Yep.
What to do?
So it is Bunny Hopper's turn for clarification. Coin Snip Snap just to get that early game tempo. Many people calling Snip Snap the king of neutral tempo cards, just given that it's flexible and very hard to remove. You can see exactly why. Anything that Psycho plays gets challenged very easily. X-Crow is interesting.
Yeah, it is, in a nutshell, somewhat useful in a rogue deck where you do have, backstabs and Shadow Step available and the option to find, even preps from lackeys in that kind of situation. But in this particular hand, it's just another kind of clunky card that's looking for combo activators that don't exist right now.
Right. Not to mention that sometimes plays directly into your opponent's game plan if they have a cheaper Sea Giant or they have Frost Novas to keep you stalled on board. Snap Bunny with 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice. We've been seeing mages favor to fight back for that tempo early game to make sure that they don't get snowballed on by the rogue. So having 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice does feel a little bit free to use one of them. Looks like he's going to go for the Conjurer's Calling here instead for double 3-drops. Which I don't hate. Something that I was talking a lot with TJ over the course of weeks is that I found that, Conjurer's Calling on 3 is surprisingly effective these days.
It is, yeah, particularly on Snip Snap itself, just because of the extra couple of tokens that you generate can make all the difference. Curiously, I think that is the second time in this exact matchup where Conjurer's Calling on Snip Snap produced Razorfen Hunter plus a 3/4. I think that exactly that happened in the previous series as well. I do think the players that we've seen today going on 3-drops have run above average with the amount of 3/4s in particular that they found. But it's a decent stat pool, and it's just when you're playing for tempo, when you're trying to play card for card, Conjurer's Calling on a 3-drop is very effective a lot of the time.
Yeah, 3/4s just seem to be dished out in spades. Meanwhile, we're trying to find reasonably stated 2-mana minions.
I know.
A lot of times we're just like, this is a 3/2. I guess we'll just play it.
Yep.
So Bunny Hopper now has the opportunity to go for those big combos we were talking about. Finds his magic trick. I don't know how useful Spellbender is against Rogue these days, given that, Psycho does have a Sap and a backstab, but looks like he's just going to wash instead. Gets a Kona Cold off the Tone of Intellect.
Yeah, the tone made sense there to me. Nothing particularly effective. Just take the free spell, give you a chance to re-roll for Elemental Evocation, for Arcane Intellect, for whatever it was going to be off the tone.
Yep, so this would be the 4th spell thrown into the Mana Cyclone pool. So Bunny Hopper should be able to play his Chief Giant if he draws next turn.
Runs out on me.
Another Tome of Intellect. Crossbow,
All
very
right.
useful card. A lot of combat tricks. Stall, AoE, single target removal, or basically tempo cards. Bunny Hopper got a decent pool. Now Psycho, once again, what we're talking about, fighting from behind.
Yeah, and worth noting that with the primary deck, he's not particularly well equipped to do that. It's something that the Rogue is able to do more effectively when it switches over to the secondary or tertiary that's teched against Mage. Whereas this is a much more tempo-focused build of the deck that really wants to be ahead, and if it falls behind, it has to just be by a small amount where, for example, Evil Miscreant and Lackeys can catch you back up onto the board.
Yep.
So
that Sorcerer's Apprentice is a high priority target removal.
This guy's toast.
Psycho can clear it off with the bounce in return using the SI7 agent.
Jeez. This is still such an ugly turn, though. It's one of the most clunky Rogue draws that I've seen. I've seen Rogue draws, obviously, that are just full of air, where just everything is unplayable. This has just been an awkward, just one card per turn kind of hand, which is in no way what Rogue wants to be doing. You can... It's kind of self-evident the class is built around combo. They have that as a keyword. They want to be doing multiple things per turn.
what to do?
Right, and at the very least, utilizing all their mana crystals, in this case, Psycho, forced to play from behind, and now Bunny, can he capitalize on that? Surprisingly, not that many options, given that he has more of a reactive hand than a proactive one, but still has a pretty decent option to set up for his future turns. This is kind of a really crucial point. You kind of mentioned at 5 mana, this is where it starts to become a really scary turning point for the Mage.
Yes. It's interesting because I'm kind of thinking about that sort of same Ziliax dynamic I was talking about, where Ziliax for 5 here, it looks perfect, it kills the 3-3, but I'm wondering whether Bunny wants to draw cards here instead and then just use the Frostbolt just so he gets closer, quicker to those big explosive turns he's going to be looking for with the Giants and whatever else. Does choose to go with the Ziliax though, like I said, makes sense. Kills the 3-3, it costs 5, let's get it done.
Yeah, getting the mana out of the way is fairly important too, and it's reasonable pressure. 5 damage on the boards. Psycho's been using his life total a lot to trade. He's not exactly a deck that gains a lot of life.
Right.
So he finds the Vendetta, which allows him to tempo a little bit more against his opponent. Is this a Vexcrow setup?
I was just about to utter those very same words, Daniel.
Wow, I haven't been called Daniel in a long time.
I don't know why I did that.
It's
It just
basically my mother and Sottle.
Good company then.
Great company. The best.
The problem is, what is your sap target here if you're going for a Vexcrow turn, right? Are you sapping your opponent's Ziliax? That doesn't seem fun.
I mean, is it worth sapping a 1/1 Microbot? Maybe not. Seems like a decent turn to also set up Shark if he's already committed to the Vendetta pre-Vexcrow.
Sure.
And it makes sense given that it seems like Bunny Hopper had a slow turn. I mean, he had free development on a board with almost a full hand. I mean, granted, half of them were randomly generated spells, but maybe Psycho is trying to preemptively get ahead of